On hand today is an awesome little computer from well-known motherboard maker MSI. Called the Cubi 2 Plus, this small form factor PC is based on the new Intel Mini-STX form factor, which sees the motherboard measure a tiny 5 inches by 5 inches. This typically means Mini-STX computers are slightly larger than their NUC counterparts, but with that added size comes a number of worthwhile advantages. PC enthusiasts will no doubt take notice of the Cubi 2 Plus's upgradability for things like the CPU, memory and storage. That's right, inside this tiny package you'll find an LGA 1151 socket, 2 SO DIMM slots and a pair of M2 slots. Before taking a peek under the hood, let's get a closer look at the Cubi 2 Plus design and check out the connectivity. From the front we have quite a busy looking device that looks a bit like two separate small form factor PCs sandwiched together. I assume there'll be models without the attached bottom section, which includes a pair of USB 2 ports and an SD card reader for good measure. Above that we have the storage device LED indicator and an infrared receiver, while to the left of that are two more USB ports. This time we're lucky enough to get a USB 3.1 Type-C port, though oddly enough next to it lies another USB 2 port. Where's the Type A USB 3 port, MSI? Up top we find a snazzy looking power button that blends into its triangle-ish squarish surroundings. Then to the right we find an interesting looking rubberized strip that's hiding yet another freaking USB 2 port. But hey, at least this one supports MSI's supercharger technology, which allows users to charge their devices even when the system is powered off. While I do appreciate the single USB 3.1 Type-C port up front, my external USB 3 storage devices certainly would have appreciated a single USB 3 Type-A port. I mean, the standard is only 8 years old now. Spinning the Cubi 2 Plus around, we find what I've been looking so desperately for, a pair of USB 3 ports. Why are these USB 3 ports hiding around the back when we have 4 USB 2 ports up front? There must be a good reason, I just can't think of what it would be. Around the back we also find a gigabit network port along with HDMI and DisplayPort outputs. It is worth pointing out that there's an alternate configuration which includes 2 HDMI ports along with a DisplayPort output, but this might not be particularly useful as the H110 chipset only supports dual monitors. There's also the DC power jack which connects to the included 90-watt power brick. Apart from all the ports just mentioned, a large section of the rear I/O has been dedicated to cooling. The rear grille has been made from a series of triangles which do look quite restrictive, so it'll be interesting to see how much this impacts cooling performance. Underneath there are 4 rubber feet, each of which includes a Phillips head screw in the middle. Removing these screws allows the base cover to be removed, and after a little more work it's possible to gain access to the motherboard. Inside we find the MSI MS-B123, a tiny little Mini-STX motherboard that's been custom built for the Cubi 2 Plus. At the heart of this motherboard is the H110 chipset, Intel's most basic desktop offering. Having said that, this chipset offers more than enough features for this tiny PC. On board we find a pair of SO DIMM slots supporting up to 32GB of DDR4 memory, assuming you can find 16GB modules. Given this little PC's specs, we feel 8GB of memory would be plenty, while 16GB could have been considered overkill. That being the case, I went with overkill, using a pair of Kingston 8GB DDR4 2133 modules. I suggest getting 2 modules to take advantage of the Skylake processor's dual channel memory controller. Along with the dual DIMM slots, we find 2 M2 slots, one for a Wi-Fi module and the other for a higher speed storage device. For testing, I went with my Samsung SM951 512GB SSD, since my 950 Pro was otherwise engaged. Those wanting to take advantage of larger storage devices will like the fact that a 2.5-inch serial ATA hard drive or SSD can also be installed in the bottom of the device. Now, because the Cubi 2 Plus is classified as a barebone PC, as we've just seen, you have to bring your own memory and storage. However, the CPU comes pre-installed and is part of the upfront cost. The Cubi 2 Plus supports the 6th generation Intel Skylake S power saving processors, and you can choose between the Core i3 6100T, Core i5 6500T, or Core i7 6700T. Because I'm cheap, I went with the 6100T, which features just 2 cores operating at 3.2 GHz. It does support hyper-threading, so there's 4 threads on offer, making the solution plenty snappy for general computing. Still, if you require more power, the 6500T boasts 4 cores operating at 2.5 GHz with a turbo frequency of up to 3.1 GHz. Then there's the 6700T, which also features 4 cores, but hyper-threading support means there are 8 threads to work with, and they operate at between 2.8 and 3.6 GHz. MSI has gone with a laptop-style CPU cooler, complete with a brushless blower from PowerLogic. The heatsink features a copper base, and maximising cooling efficiency is a pair of copper heat pipes, which help transfer heat to a small bank of aluminium fins. Also included as standard is an Intel dual-band wireless AC 3165 Wi-Fi adapter, which, like the processor, comes pre-installed. All up, the Cubi 2 Plus weighs 1.2 kilograms and measures 148mm wide, 155mm deep, and just 62mm tall. The all-black design looks sleek, and I can see this tiny PC fitting in nicely to just about any setting. Finally, for those buying the Cubi 2 Plus as a bare bone, be aware that MSI doesn't include any software in the package. So, is this a little STX you'll be considering? Let me know in the comments. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time.